Hello, brothers and sisters in Christ and family and friends. Today we are going to be continuing our study in the book of Matthew. Last study we covered Matthew chapter 1, where we went over the legal lineage of Christ, which is in comparison to Luke's account, which goes over the biological lineage of Christ. So that whole chapter 1 was all about the legal lineage of Christ. And so now let's go ahead and hop into chapter 2 with a quick recap of what we're going to, or review of what we will see in this chapter. So first of the four things is that wise men are going to arrive in Bethlehem to worship Jesus. They follow the star right above Jesus's house, or Mary and Joseph's house, to go and worship him. In the second step, Mary and Joseph flee to Egypt due to Herod seeking to kill Jesus. The third, Herod massacres the children of the land in an attempt to kill Jesus. And the fourth, Mary and Joseph return back to Israel into the lower portion of Galilee in a city called Nazareth. So let's go ahead and hop in to verse 1 of our chapter. Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem. So I have quite a few comments for this verse here. The first one is that this word wise men comes from the ancient Hebrew word magos. And magos is synonymous with a magi, a magician, a sorcerer, or an oriental scientist. So there's a variety of terms here. You might think of magi and magician as or sorcerer as something very different from an oriental scientist. And I wouldn't blame you. It seems like this word wise men or magos has a variety of meanings, a wide scope of what it could compose of. And another couple of things I want to note about this is that a lot of people, they assume that there was 3 wise men that came to Jesus. And I think the reason why a lot of people think this is because they were bearing 3 different types of gifts. There was gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So people just say, oh, well, that must mean that one king had one of these things, and the second one had another one of these things, and the third had the other, right? But there's no account of how many of these wise men were actually there. And I tend to believe, based off one of my friends, he did a lesson on this as well, and he suggested that they likely traveled in a big pack. So there may have been many wise men. There also may have been many different people that accompanied these wise men to keep them safe. And because it was not safe to travel in small numbers back then. They're taking quite the trip to go and see him from the Orient to there. And they're taking quite the trip. So they needed to be safe on their journeys. And another assumption is that they were kings. But in fact, there's nothing in the Bible that suggests that these 3 individuals or I guess they're not even 3. See, I'm falling into the same trap as well. That they were kings. But there's no account of this. Nowhere in there does it say that they're kings. Specifically, it uses the word magos. And this idea of having magi can also be traced back to the book of Daniel, where it goes over and mentions that Daniel was the chiefest of the magi. He was a specific guy who had the Spirit of the Lord, and God was working through him for different prophecies. And it's interesting because you can actually track where you find out that where this false assumption comes in, that there was 3 and that there were kings. And I believe this personally came from this book called Excerpta Latina Barbari. And this is a document that came out in 500 AD, 500 years later after Christ, that documents that there were 3 kings from Arabia, Persia, and India. But this is nowhere in the biblical account. This is in the Excerpta Latina Barbari. So this is something that was added to the Bible. This is something that we should condemn, anything that adds to the Bible that is false, and something that does not go along with the biblical account. Okay, next one, let's look at verse 2, saying, "Where's he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and are come to worship him." And prior to studying this chapter, I thought that the first time I heard King of the Jews was when Pilate was writing the title for Jesus on the cross as, "Behold, King of the Jews." He wrote King of the Jews on that plaque. And but it says here that these wise men, they referred to him as King of the Jews. They wanted to come and worship this King of the Jews. It's interesting because one of my favorite commentaries, People's New Testament commentary, they suggest that they believe that these magi thought that this was a physical king rather than a spiritual king. Jesus is our spiritual king, not our physical king. And so they think that the Magi had it mistaken. They thought that People's New Testament commentary thought that it was a physical king. But I believe that they knew that it was a spiritual king. The reason I think that is because they came to worship. This Jesus. Okay, verse 3. When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. So we see here, you might be thinking, why is Herod concerned? It's just a little boy. What's the deal with this? It's just a little boy in a nowhere town of Bethlehem. What's going on here? And the reason why I personally believe this is because there's a prophecy in Micah that prophesies that there's going to be a ruler that will be born in Bethlehem. So I believe Herod knew about this prophecy from Micah, and I believe he knew that this ruler was going to sprout out of this place, and these wise men are coming to worship him. So he's like, there we go. There's that ruler. I have to extinguish it while it's a child. Therefore, I will have no threat to my earthly kingdom. And so then let's read verse 4. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born. So Herod is inquiring of the people. He's saying, where is this Jesus? Where is him? I need to kill him. He didn't say that, but he was saying, show me where this boy is. Maybe I'll worship him. You can see that sarcasm in there. Verse 5. And they said unto him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, and thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not the least among the princes of Judah. For out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. So it's referring back to that prophecy that I was referring to in Micah chapter 5, verse 2, that says, but thou, Bethlehem Ephratah, be thou, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me that is to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth have been from old, from everlasting. And so it also has some pretty beautiful prophecy in here about how Jesus is not, he always was. From before and after the earth, Jesus always will be. He's not confined to this earthly vessel. He has always been from the very beginning, at the very creation, to the very end. When this whole world is gone away and is burnt to pieces, Jesus will still be there. He is right now, he's preparing a place for us in heaven, and we are anticipating our time with him in heaven for those that are Christians. Verse 5. Okay, we just read that. And we also read verse 6. So now I want to take a brief moment to talk about Bethlehem's significance. This is not just any ordinary place. I said that this was a middle of nowhere place, but that's actually not the truth, because this city, according to the People's New Testament commentary, was 1,500 years old before Jesus was born. This was a very, very old city. I mean, this is a city that was practically at the start of time here. A very, very old city. So we see that it has some cultural significance in how old it is. We also see that it has prophetic significance, as we saw in Micah chapter 5, verse 2. So I'll put the 1,500. I'll put prophetic. And we also have that King David was born and raised in Bethlehem. And if we remember back to Matthew chapter 1, we studied about how, I'm going to scroll back here, David in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 13 says, he shall build an house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. So what this is suggesting, that David, 28 generations before Jesus, was given this promise for an everlasting kingdom, an everlasting covenant that would extend beyond his lifetime. It would continue on all the way up unto Jesus. And that's why it's so important to prove the legal lineage of Christ, because it has to track back to David, because if it doesn't track back to David, it's null. It's of none effect. Okay. And so David was actually born and raised there. Luke chapter 2, verse 4. And Joseph also went up from Galilee out of the city of Nazareth into Judea, unto the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David. So this was the place where King David was born and raised. So I'll just put David here. And another one of Jesus' relatives comes from the story of Ruth. So just a quick little recap of the story of Ruth. There was Naomi and Elimelech, and her two sons, and they sojourned to the land of Moab, where they found Ruth and Orpah. The two sons married Ruth and Orpah, were two Moabites. And sure enough, Naomi's husband Elimelech passes away; he dies, and then her two sons Mahlon and Chilion, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that, but both of the sons died as well. And so in that story, Orpah decides she's going to stay in Moab. She feels bad for Naomi that her two sons have died, but she says, no, I'm going to stay with my people. But then Ruth says, wherever you are, I want to be. Your God will be my God. And she just is expressing how much she loves Naomi, and she's going to follow her no matter what she does. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Your home will be my home. Your people will be my people. And it's one of the most beautiful verses. I really encourage you to go through those 4 chapters of Ruth and listen to that beautiful love story of how dedicated Ruth was to her mother-in-law Naomi. And sure enough, in this step here, we have Ruth eventually, around chapters 2, 3, and 4 of chapter Ruth, or of the book of Ruth, gets with this man named Obed. And Obed, if we continue on this lineage here, there was, let's see here. Or sorry, it's not Obed, it's Boaz. Sorry about that. And Boaz is in the lineage of Christ. And get this, and this whole story takes place in Bethlehem. They first went to Moab, and then they came back to this little place, Bethlehem in Judea. So it has a lot of cultural significance. It also has this lineage clear back 28 generations before this with David. Okay, let's continue on here. Verse 7. Then Herod, when he had privily called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, Go and search diligently for the young child. And when ye have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. When they had heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was. And so there's something very interesting I want to note here in verse 9. This was no ordinary occurrence. This is not like you read about how sailors would use the stars to navigate. This was no ordinary event. It says they followed the star. The star was actually moving, and it was above the place where Jesus was at. It gave a very obvious indicator to these wise men exactly where Jesus was at. What exactly this looked like, it mentions that it was a star, and we know that stars are way, way, way up there, so I'm not exactly what this star was. It mentions it's a star. Maybe it was a star. I don't know exactly what it looked like or what it was, but we do know that we have this biblical account of what occurred here, and it's beyond what the typical natural world shows us. This is something supernatural, something that was divine, something that God wanted to happen so these wise men could get to Jesus. So there would be an indicator of the Messiah. Verse 10, when they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And when they came into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Something kind of interesting and random is that I've made beard oil in the past. Kind of embarrassing, but I've made my own beard oil, and I mix it all together. And I actually put frankincense and myrrh. They smell fantastic. I don't know if they're the same kind of frankincense and myrrh in biblical times, but they smell fantastic, and I love it in my beard oils. Makes my beard so soft. Oh, so nice. I know even my wife, she puts it in her hair. She'll steal some of my beard oil, and she'll put it in her hair. And so this is some really great stuff. But not only that, today you might be able to buy it for $20-$30 for 1 ounce. But back then, this was something that was extremely valuable. And obviously gold, very valuable. But frankincense and myrrh was also something that was very, very valuable. And what's the significance of this incredible value? It also shows us that in the story, when Mary and Joseph had to flee with Jesus into Egypt, I'll just show the little path here. When they had to flee from Bethlehem into Egypt, what was going to fund their journey? How are they going to get there? Because they were not necessarily wealthy people. And so these 3 gifts were something that could fund this journey out to Egypt. And later, when an angel of the Lord warns them again, or lets them know that Herod had passed away, then they go a different way. I'm not sure of the exact path that they went, but they go a different way. And then Jesus is raised in Galilee, in the southern portion, which is called Nazareth. And at the last verse of our chapter, it talks about how it was prophesied by the prophets that he was going to be a Nazarene. And we'll also talk about that at the end of the lesson. So stay tuned. Get all the way to the end of this study, and we'll talk about the significance of him being a Nazarene. Okay. Verse 12. And being warned of God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. And so, like I said, they went another way. They did not go the exact same path. Verse 13. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeareth to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise, and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. So they're first warned by an angel of the Lord that they needed to get out of there. They needed to take their son Jesus and go down to Egypt. Okay. Verse 14. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night and departed into Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt have I called my son. So what's really beautiful about this chapter is it's just littered and littered and littered with all this prophecy. I mean, even the location, Bethlehem, we knew that a ruler was going to come out of this that was going to rule the people. And also, there's prophecy that also links this to Egypt. So both of those locations have prophecy. And then in the very last verse of our chapter, there's also prophecy of the last place, Nazareth. And if you want to memorize this journey, I really like the acronym BEN, B-E-N, Bethlehem, Egypt, Nazareth. It kind of helps you memorize this journey here. Okay. Verse 16, Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceeding wroth, and sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem and all the coast thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. And so for some reason, I don't know where this came from. Maybe it's kind of like that one book I told you about that was written in 500 AD, where there was some falsehood that got revealed. For some reason, I always thought it was Herod only killed the 2-year-old males, 2 years old and younger males. But it says that Herod went about to Bethlehem and he had all the kids, male and female. It doesn't mention male or female, so it says all the kids, that he killed all of them. And it says also in all the coasts thereof of Bethlehem. And so I don't know if that also includes the Dead Sea. Sorry, I didn't mark that on there. The Dead Sea right there. I don't know if that included there or goes clear over to the Mediterranean Sea. But it was a horrible, horrible killing by Herod. And then in reference to to Herod killing all the 2-year-old and younger babies, it says in verse 17, Then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremy the prophet, saying, And Ramah was there a voice heard, lamentation and weeping and great mourning. Rachel weeping for her children, and would not be comforted because they are not. So this is actually in reference to Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 15. And if you remember back, Rachel was the mother of two. She was she was Jacob's wife, one of Jacob's wives, and she had the children Dan and Naphtali, 2 of the 12 tribes of Israel. And what's interesting here is the People's New Testament commentary let me know that within half a mile of that city was the tomb of Rachel. So it says that Rachel would be weeping for her children where all this massacre occurred, but she's dead. And it says that her tomb was half a mile away from the location of where this happened. So this is a very, very, very odd thing to see here for a prophecy. The best explanation that I can think of would be to say that this is basically just saying Rachel was rolling in her grave. This is such a horrible thing that if she was alive, she would be devastated by what happened here. So we can kind of go back to an English idiom, but I'm not sure if that same idiom applies to their culture. So I have to concede that I'm not exactly sure what this prophecy is indicating here. Verse 19, But when Herod was dead, behold, an angel of the Lord appeareth in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, Arise, and take the young child and his mother, and go into the land of Israel, for they are dead which sought the young child's life. And he rose and took the young child and his mother, and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus did reign in Judea in the room of his father Herod, he was afraid to go thither. Notwithstanding, being warned of God in a dream, he turned aside into the parts of Galilee. So we see that Herod's son Archelaus, Joseph was very scared of Archelaus. He thought he would be just like his father and would desire to kill Jesus. Verse 23, and he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophets, he shall be called a Nazarene. So there's quite a bit I want to dissect on this right here. Erase really quick. Oh, my whole whiteboard's moving. Let's see if I can move it back. Okay. So the first detail I want to note in this last, in verse 23, is that it was by prophets. This says that this was not by just one prophet, it was by prophets. And so this indicates to us that there's multiple different prophecies that we're going to have to refer to see the fulfillment of this. Because there's no direct Old Testament verse that says that Jesus was going to be a Nazarene. There's things that allude to it with a combination of several different prophecies, but that's why we need to refer exactly to how the Bible wrote it, to prophets. So there's this multiple aspect here. The next aspect that I want to talk about here is that is this word branch, and it comes from the Hebrew word natzer, which is then some linguists suggest that this word natzer then became, or as the words evolved or became, or over time, this word natzer became Nazarene. And so there's many different Old Testament prophecies of Jesus being referred to as the branch, or the righteous branch that is going to deliver his people. So let's just read one or two prophecies here about how Jesus is the branch. Okay. Zechariah chapter 6, verse 12, and speak unto him, saying, Thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, Behold, the man whose name is the branch, and he shall grow up out of his place, and he shall build the temple of the Lord. So this is very clearly directed. This branch is Jesus. And so if this word Natzer really does go to this word Nazarene, then that would have been obvious to the people if they knew that that connection to this word Natzer to Nazarene. Let's read one more verse about this branch. Jeremiah chapter 33, verse 15. In those days at that time will I cause the branch of righteousness to grow up unto David, and he shall execute judgment and righteousness in the land. And so we know that, like I mentioned earlier, David was 28 generations before Jesus, but Jesus is in the lineage of David, and it refers to also Jesus as the branch of righteousness. Who is righteous? It is Jesus. Jesus is the one that is righteous. He comes from this righteous branch from David 28 generations later, and that's that fulfillment or continuation of the everlasting covenant that was first promised to Abraham, and then to David, and then all the way to Jesus. And so that's one explanation of where this last verse that refers to how Jesus was going to be a Nazarene, or it was fulfilling that prophecy that he would be a Nazarene. Okay. And so that's actually all I had on the chapter. Actually, one more thing. Sorry. Pause. Don't turn off the video. There's one more. Another suggestion when they said that, behold, he would be a Nazarene, was some people have suggested that maybe that was because he was going to be of humble origins. And if we look back at the story of when Philip was talking to Nathan, and he said, behold, the Messiah has been born, and he's been raised, and he's actually going amongst the people and preaching them. He's here. The Messiah is among us. And then he says, Nathan's like, well, where is he? And he goes, oh, he's a Nazarene. And then Nathan, it's interesting, he says, what good cometh out of Nazareth? And so what we see here is this place Nazareth in southern Galilee was a place of very humble origins. This is a place where you're like, wow, really? The Messiah came out of this place right here? That's very bizarre to me. But then Jesus talks to Nathan, and he tells him, behold, not very many days hence, you'll see angels ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. And that's where there's also that reference of that story to Jacob's ladder. Right? So I really highly recommend you study both of those examples there. But that's what it's all about, that it was of a humble origin. So it would have been very obvious to the people that it would have been that he was going to be a Nazarene, somebody of a humble origin. So there's three different ideas here to break down for that. That he came from prophets, or this idea or fulfillment came from prophets, that Jesus is this branch, or the branch of righteousness, and that comes from the Hebrew word Nazir, which then becomes Nazarene, or it could be that he was of a humble origins, and that's simply all that's suggesting there. Never won any lesson without going over the plan of salvation, which is to hear, believe, repent of our sins, confess that Jesus Christ is the Son of the living God, and then be baptized. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. I really appreciate you and love you. Please like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. Or comment and say I love the video. Or if you have any questions or ideas, or you'd like to contact me in any way, feel free to comment. I love seeing those comments, and they really encourage me. All right. Well, God bless and take care.